Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you inspiring tales of resilience, courage, and the power of empathy. In today's story, we follow Dr. Taylor Morgan, a dedicated medical director at Riverside General Hospital, as she faces relentless challenges from a brilliant but egotistical surgeon determined to undermine her leadership. What begins as professional tension escalates into a battle of ethics, trust, and perseverance. Through it all, Taylor's unwavering commitment to her team and her patients lights the way forward. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories as we begin today's powerful journey of integrity and triumph. Let's dive in. Dr. Taylor Morgan had always believed in leading by example. At Riverside General Hospital, her mornings often began with a warm cup of coffee and a genuine smile for the security guards she passed at the entrance. Despite her title as medical director, she rarely stayed confined to her office. Instead, she immersed herself in the hospital's bustling life, ensuring she understood the challenges her team faced daily. On what seemed like an ordinary day, Taylor arrived earlier than usual. She felt a familiar mix of excitement and responsibility as she reviewed the day's schedule, which included a particularly complex heart surgery. But as she stepped into one of the patient rooms, her day took an unexpected turn. Dr. Ethan Collins stormed into the room, his voice sharp and commanding, his frustration palpable. He wasn't alone. Behind him trailed a small group of nurses and assistants, their faces tense. Taylor had just finished checking on a post-operative patient when his voice cut through the air like a whip. "Who gave you the authority to make decisions about my patient?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing as they landed on her. Taylor straightened her posture, keeping her tone even. "Dr. Collins, the patient's vitals are stable, and the team is monitoring closely. I'm here to ensure everything runs smoothly." But Collins didn't care for explanations. "You think this is your role? Where's the charge nurse? This is a surgical matter, not administrative oversight." His voice was loud enough to draw the attention of nearby staff, and Taylor could feel the weight of their gazes. A part of her wanted to push back against his arrogance, but she knew better. She nodded, keeping her voice calm. "Of course, Doctor. I'll ensure the patient continues to receive the best care." The tension in the room lingered even after he left. Taylor took a deep breath, willing her emotions to settle. She wasn't new to moments like this, moments where her leadership was questioned, where her dedication to patient care was dismissed because she wasn't standing in the spotlight with a scalpel in hand. Throughout her career, Taylor had encountered people like Ethan Collins, brilliant surgeons, yes, but their skill often came wrapped in unchecked egos. Collins was no exception. His temper was infamous, and his interactions with the nursing staff often bordered on hostile. Yet, his surgical success rate had always been his saving grace, shielding him from accountability. Later that day, Taylor found herself observing the surgical team preparing for the complex procedure she had reviewed earlier. She liked to be present in moments like these, not to interfere but to quietly support the team. But when Collins noticed her presence, his irritation was immediate. "You again," he snapped, his tone laced with disdain. "I thought I made myself clear earlier." Taylor remained composed. "I'm here to ensure the patient receives the best care possible." "The best care? Don't flatter yourself," Collins sneered. "If you want to help, stay out of my way." She opened her mouth to respond, but a scrub nurse signaled that the patient was ready, drawing Collins's attention back to the task at hand. Taylor stepped back, her mind racing. Collins's words stung, not because they belittled her authority, but because they disregarded the collaborative spirit essential in healthcare. By the time she returned to her office, Taylor felt the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders. She replayed the events in her mind, questioning if she could have handled things differently. Her role required diplomacy, a balance between supporting her team and asserting her authority without alienating strong personalities like Collins. As she sat down to review paperwork, There was a knock on her door. It was Maria, one of the newer nurses. The young woman's face was pale, her hands twisting nervously. "Dr. Morgan, I just wanted to thank you," Maria said softly, "for standing up to Dr. Collins earlier. He's been so hard on us lately. It's good to know someone has our back." Taylor offered a kind smile, sensing Maria's apprehension. "Maria, you're an important part of this team. No one has the right to treat you or anyone else disrespectfully. If you ever feel mistreated, come to me. We'll handle it together." Maria nodded, her shoulders relaxing. "Thank you. It means a lot." After Maria left, Taylor sat quietly for a moment, her gaze drifting to the window. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight painted the hospital courtyard in a golden hue. She thought about the patients, the nurses, the assistants, each one relying on her leadership in ways they might never say aloud. Taylor knew this wasn't just about her or Collins. It was about the culture of the hospital, about creating a space where everyone felt valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work. She felt a renewed sense of purpose as she turned her attention back to her desk. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was determined to face them with the same empathy and resilience that had brought her this far. This was just the beginning, and Taylor knew the storm with Ethan Collins was far from over. But in that moment, she reminded herself of a lesson she had learned early in her career. True leadership wasn't about power or recognition, it was about service, love, and unwavering dedication to those you lead. The day after the tense encounters with Dr. Ethan Collins, Dr. Taylor Morgan arrived at Riverside General Hospital feeling an undercurrent of unease. The morning sun barely peeked through the clouds, casting a subdued light over the hospital's entrance. Taylor couldn't shake the feeling that yesterday's confrontations were just the beginning. The whispers started before Taylor even reached her office. Passing nurses exchanged glances, their voices hushed as she approached. In the staff break room, the tension was palpable. "Did you hear about the email?" one voice murmured as Taylor walked by. She paused, then entered the room to find a group of nurses crowded around a printed sheet of paper pinned to the bulletin board. It was an anonymous email, circulated to staff, accusing Taylor of overstepping her role and creating confusion among the medical team. The accusations were vague but pointed, implying that her involvement in patient care was disruptive and unnecessary. Her stomach tightened as she read the carefully worded statements. It was clear that Collins's fingerprints were all over this. He hadn't mentioned her name outright, but the insinuations were undeniable. A nurse named Eleanor, a seasoned professional and one of Taylor's most reliable allies, approached her with a frown. "Taylor, this is ridiculous," Eleanor said, her voice laced with anger. "We all know what's going on here. He's trying to undermine you." Taylor took a deep breath and folded her arms. "I appreciate the support, Eleanor, but we need to stay focused. This isn't about me, it's about ensuring the hospital stays united. I'll address this. But for now, let's keep our attention on the patients." Eleanor nodded reluctantly, her expression softening. "We've got your back. Don't let him get to you." By mid-morning, Taylor was in a meeting with William Harris, the hospital's administrator and one of her most trusted colleagues. He had a copy of the email in his hands, his brow furrowed as he read. "This is deliberate," Harris said, setting the paper down on the table. "Collins is trying to discredit you without directly confronting you. It's cowardly." Taylor nodded. "It's not just about me, Will. He's creating an environment where the staff feel like they have to choose sides. That's dangerous for morale and for patient care." Harris leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "You're right. We'll initiate an internal investigation to trace the source of the email. In the meantime, I think it's time you addressed the staff directly. Clear the air before this escalates any further." Taylor agreed, though the thought of standing in front of the staff to defend herself left her feeling vulnerable. Still, she knew it was necessary. That afternoon, She sent out an invitation for a hospital-wide meeting, framing it as an opportunity for open dialogue about recent concerns. The auditorium was filled when Taylor stepped onto the small stage. Her heart pounded as she faced the sea of faces: nurses, doctors, technicians, and administrative staff, all watching her intently. She felt the weight of their expectations but reminded herself why she was there. "Thank you all for coming," Taylor began, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "I'm sure many of you have seen the email circulating this morning. I want to address it directly." She paused, scanning the room. The claims in that email are not only false, but they misrepresent what leadership and collaboration in healthcare should be about. "My goal has always been to support this team, not to disrupt it. I believe in being present, in understanding the challenges you face, and in stepping up when the situation demands it." There were murmurs of agreement in the audience, and Taylor felt a flicker of hope. She continued, "I know there's been uncertainty, and I welcome any questions or concerns you have. Transparency is important to me, and I want to make sure we're all moving forward together." The room was silent for a moment before Eleanor stood, her voice ringing out with conviction. "I've worked with Dr. Morgan for years, and I can say without hesitation that her involvement in patient care has always been about helping, not interfering. We trust her." A ripple of applause followed, and Taylor felt a swell of gratitude. As the meeting continued, more staff members spoke up, voicing their support. By the time it ended, the tension in the room had eased, and Taylor felt the first glimmers of solidarity forming among the team. But as she returned to her office that evening, Taylor couldn't shake the feeling that Collins wasn't done yet. His tactics were escalating, and she knew the road ahead would only grow more difficult. For now, though, she took solace in the support of her team, drawing strength from their belief in her leadership. Whatever came next, she would be ready. The days following the staff meeting brought a mix of relief and tension for Dr. Taylor Morgan. While the meeting had solidified the support of many on her team, the air at Riverside General remained heavy with unease. Whispers about the anonymous email and murmurs of "what if it's true" floated through the halls, though few dared to voice such doubts directly to Taylor. Taylor did her best to rise above it, but the undercurrent of suspicion was impossible to ignore. She continued her routine, walking the hospital corridors, checking on patients, and chatting with nurses. She knew that her presence reassured many, but it wasn't enough to dispel the doubts entirely. It was during one of these rounds that Taylor found herself in the ICU, assessing a patient recovering from a particularly complicated surgery. The nurses and doctors on duty worked seamlessly, their movements a testament to the kind of collaboration she had always tried to foster. But just as she began to relax, the atmosphere shifted. Dr. Ethan Collins strode into the room, his expression dark and his voice sharp. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his gaze sweeping over the team before landing squarely on Taylor. "I'm here checking on the patient's progress," Taylor replied, her tone calm but firm. Collins scoffed, his frustration evident. "Progress? Or interference? This isn't your domain, Dr. Morgan. I don't need you undermining my team." The nurses froze, their gazes flicking nervously between the two doctors. Taylor took a slow breath, keeping her voice measured. "Dr. Collins, the patient's condition was critical. I stepped in to ensure everything was on track. This is about collaboration, not territory." But Collins wasn't interested in collaboration. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his intensity. "You're overstepping, and it's creating confusion. Stick to what you're good at, managing from an office." Taylor held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. "What I'm good at, Dr. Collins, is ensuring this hospital provides the best possible care for every patient. If that means stepping in when I see a need, I'll do it every time." The tension in the room was palpable. But before Collins could respond, the patient monitor emitted a sharp beep. Both doctors turned their attention to the patient. And the moment dissolved into a flurry of action as the team worked to stabilize the situation. Afterward, as the team transferred the now stable patient to recovery, Collins approached Taylor in the hallway. His anger simmered beneath the surface as he spoke in a low, cutting tone. "You think you're helping, but all you're doing is undermining authority and creating chaos. This ends now." Taylor stared at him, her expression calm but her heart pounding. "What ends? Dr. Collins. Is this hostility? We're on the same team, whether you like it or not. I suggest we start acting like it." Collins didn't respond. Instead, he turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Taylor standing alone in the hallway. She exhaled slowly, the weight of the day pressing down on her. By the time she returned to her office, her phone was buzzing with a message from William Harris. "We need to meet. It's about Collins." Taylor arrived at Harris's office to find him seated behind his desk, a grim expression on his face. He gestured for her to sit, sliding a folder toward her. "It's worse than we thought," he began. "Collins isn't just undermining you in meetings or with anonymous emails. He's started leaking information to the press." Taylor opened the folder to see printed excerpts from a local news article. The piece hinted at leadership issues at Riverside General, citing anonymous sources and implying that Taylor's involvement in patient care had led to mistakes. Her stomach sank. "He's escalating," she murmured. Harris nodded. "And we need to act fast. The board is already nervous. If this gains traction, it could damage not only your reputation but the hospital's as well." Taylor felt the familiar fire of resolve rising in her chest. "We'll handle it. I'll prepare a statement. Meet with the board. And address the staff again if I have to. He's trying to divide us. But I won't let him win." Harris smiled faintly, his respect for Taylor evident. "I knew you'd say that. Let's get to work." As Taylor left Harris's office, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on her. She knew this battle wasn't just about her, it was about protecting the hospital, her team, and the culture of collaboration and trust she had worked so hard to build. She didn't yet know how far Collins would go, but she was determined to stand her ground and fight for what was right. The escalation with Dr. Ethan Collins was no longer confined to the halls of Riverside General Hospital. What had started as snide remarks and internal conflict had spilled into the public eye, threatening not just Dr. Taylor Morgan's reputation but the hospital's credibility as a whole. Taylor barely had time to process the implications of the news article before another blow landed. A lawsuit. William Harris called Taylor into his office the morning after the article was published. His face was drawn, and he looked like he hadn't slept. "Taylor, we have a situation," he said, gesturing for her to sit. Taylor set her bag on the chair beside her, steeling herself. "Let me guess, Collins." Harris nodded, sliding a legal document across the desk. He's filed a wrongful dismissal claim against the hospital. Claims discrimination, targeting, and defamation of character. Taylor stared at the document, her jaw tightening. "He wasn't dismissed," she said evenly. "He's on administrative leave pending investigation. That's not wrongful termination." Harris sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I know that. And the board knows that. But Collins is playing a long game here. He's framing the investigation as biased, claiming we're retaliating against him for raising valid concerns." The words stung, not because they held any truth but because of the damage they could do. "What's the board's stance?" Taylor asked, her voice steady. "They're backing you," Harris replied. "But they're cautious. They want to avoid public drama if possible." Taylor exhaled deeply, the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. She had expected resistance from Collins, but his ability to manipulate the narrative was unnerving. "What's our next move?" Harris leaned forward, his gaze steady. "We fight back. The internal investigation is almost complete, and the evidence against him is strong. We'll need to present a unified front to the board and the staff. More importantly, we need to stay transparent. The staff trusts you, Taylor. That's our strongest asset right now. Over the next several days, Taylor threw herself into preparing for the battles ahead. She worked closely with Harris and the legal team, combing through every detail of the case. The investigation had uncovered a clear link between Collins and the anonymous email, as well as evidence that he had leaked confidential patient information to the press. Despite the mounting evidence in her favor, Taylor couldn't ignore the toll the situation was taking on the hospital. Morale was shaky, and the staff seemed divided. Some were staunchly in her corner, while others remained cautious, wary of choosing sides too soon. It was during one of her routine rounds that Taylor encountered Maria in the ICU. The young nurse hesitated before speaking, her voice soft. "Dr. Morgan, can I talk to you?" "Of course," Taylor said, gesturing for Maria to step aside. Maria glanced around nervously. "I just wanted to say, some of us are scared. Not because we don't believe you, but because, well, Dr. Collins has power. He's got connections. And people like me, we don't feel like we have a voice." Taylor's heart clenched. She placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, her expression gentle but firm. "Maria, your voice matters more than you know. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. If you ever need support, you come to me. We're in this together." Maria nodded, her eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you, Dr. Morgan. That means a lot." Taylor returned to her office that evening feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Collins's tactics weren't just about her, they were about creating fear and division. And if fear was his weapon, then she would counter it with transparency and solidarity. The next morning, Taylor convened a meeting with the board. The room was tense as she presented the findings of the investigation, detailing Collins's breaches of ethics and violations of confidentiality. "This isn't just about my leadership," she concluded. "It's about the values of this hospital. If we allow behavior like Dr. Collins's to go unchecked, we risk undermining everything we stand for." The board listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to resolve. By the end of the meeting, they had unanimously agreed to release a statement affirming their support for Taylor and condemning Collins's actions. But Taylor knew the fight wasn't over. Collins had proven time and again that he wasn't afraid to escalate, and she braced herself for whatever came next. Yet, in the quiet moments between the chaos, she reminded herself of why she had taken on this role: to protect the people who relied on her, to uphold the integrity of the hospital, and to show that even in the face of relentless challenges, true leadership meant standing firm for what was right. The storm at Riverside General Hospital showed no signs of abating. Just as Dr. Taylor Morgan began to feel the faintest glimmers of progress, Ethan Collins launched his boldest attack yet. This time, it wasn't an email or a lawsuit. It was a press conference. Taylor sat in the hospital's media room, surrounded by senior staff and administrators, her eyes glued to the screen. There he was, standing behind a podium, flanked by a row of attorneys. Collins looked composed, almost smug, as cameras flashed and reporters jotted down notes. "Today," Collins began, his voice calm and measured, "I'm here to expose troubling practices at Riverside General Hospital, practices that jeopardize patient care and staff morale. For months, I have raised concerns about leadership decisions that undermine the integrity of our work. Instead of addressing these concerns, the administration has targeted me with baseless accusations to silence my voice." Taylor clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. His words were carefully crafted, designed to sow doubt in the minds of staff and the public. But then came the real blow. Collins held up a thick folder. "I have compiled evidence," he declared, "of systemic failures under the current leadership. This includes internal emails, patient records, and testimonies from staff members." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Taylor's stomach dropped. Patient records. If Collins had accessed confidential files, it was a breach of ethics and potentially illegal. William Harris, seated beside her, leaned in, his voice low. We need to act fast. This is a direct attack on the hospital's reputation. The public doesn't know the context, and his narrative could do serious damage. Taylor nodded, her resolve hardening. We'll address it. Transparency is our strength, and we'll show the truth. That evening, Taylor and Harris worked late into the night, crafting the hospital's response. The next morning, the board convened an emergency meeting. The atmosphere was tense as Taylor presented the situation. Her tone calm but firm. We've identified breaches of confidentiality, she explained. Dr. Collins has not only violated hospital policy but has put patient trust at risk. We need to act decisively, not just to protect our reputation but to reaffirm our commitment to ethical standards. The board agreed, and preparations for a counter-press conference began immediately. When the day arrived, Taylor stood at the podium, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. The weight of the hospital's reputation rested on her shoulders. But she knew the truth was on her side. Thank you for being here, she began, her voice steady. Recent allegations have raised concerns, and I want to address them directly. Riverside General has always been committed to patient care and integrity, and we will not allow baseless accusations to compromise that mission. She outlined the hospital's stance with clarity, refuting Collins's claims and emphasizing the steps being taken to protect patient confidentiality. She spoke of collaboration, of trust, and of the values that defined Riverside General. Leadership isn't about power or control, she concluded. It's about accountability, service, and working together to achieve the best outcomes for our patients. I stand by my decisions, and I stand by this team. The room was silent for a moment before the reporters began firing questions. Taylor answered each one with poise, refusing to let emotion cloud her responses. By the end of the conference, the narrative had begun to shift. Staff members voiced their support for Taylor, and even skeptical reporters seemed swayed by her sincerity. But Collins wasn't done. A day later, a heavily edited video surfaced online, painting Taylor as dismissive of patient concerns during her tenure at another hospital. It was a blatant manipulation, but it spread quickly, drawing speculation and criticism. Taylor's heart sank as she watched the video, but she didn't let it break her. She and Harris worked swiftly, releasing the unedited footage, which revealed the truth. Taylor had been addressing staff concerns with professionalism and compassion. The response was immediate. The medical community rallied around her, condemning Collins's tactics and praising Taylor's leadership. That evening, Taylor received a call from Harris. "We've got him," he said, his tone triumphant. Collins's account was traced as the source of the leaks and the video. The evidence is irrefutable. Taylor exhaled, relief washing over her. What's next? Collins's attorneys are requesting a settlement. Harris replied. He knows he's lost. Taylor paused, considering her options. If he drops his claims and accepts accountability, we can move forward. But the hospital's integrity must come first. The settlement was finalized within days. Collins resigned, his medical license suspended pending further investigation. For the first time in weeks, Riverside General felt like it could breathe again. Taylor knew the battle had taken its toll, but as she walked through the hospital that evening, she was greeted with smiles and words of encouragement from her staff. She had fought not just for herself but for them, and she had won. The air at Riverside General Hospital felt lighter in the days following Dr. Ethan Collins's resignation. The corridors, once heavy with whispers and uncertainty, now buzzed with a cautious optimism. Staff members exchanged smiles and stopped to chat longer than they had in weeks. The storm had passed, and in its place was the promise of healing. Dr. Taylor Morgan felt the shift, though the weight of recent events still lingered on her shoulders. She walked through the hospital with her usual steady presence, stopping to check on patients and greet staff members. Everywhere she went, she was met with quiet words of encouragement. "We're so glad you stayed strong," a nurse whispered as Taylor reviewed a chart in the ICU. "You've shown us what real leadership looks like," said a young doctor who had only recently joined the hospital. Taylor thanked them. But inside, she knew this wasn't a victory to celebrate in isolation. The staff's support had been the cornerstone of her resolve. Without their belief in her, the outcome might have been very different. The hospital administration was quick to move forward, issuing a statement reaffirming its commitment to integrity and patient care. Taylor's leadership was praised publicly, and the steps taken to address Collins's misconduct were highlighted as part of a broader initiative to rebuild trust within the organization. But Taylor knew that rebuilding wasn't just about public statements. It was about action. She began meeting with department heads to discuss the challenges that had come to light during the conflict. She wanted to hear their concerns directly, to understand where gaps in communication and collaboration had occurred. Her conversations were candid but constructive, focusing on how the hospital could learn from the experience and emerge stronger. One afternoon, Taylor sat in her office, reviewing a proposal for a new initiative aimed at fostering collaboration among staff. The plan included regular team-building exercises, anonymous feedback systems, and conflict resolution training. It was ambitious but necessary, she thought. Trust couldn't simply be restored, it had to be cultivated. As she worked, there was a knock on her door. Maria, the young nurse who had been one of Taylor's most vocal supporters, stepped inside with Eleanor, the senior nurse who had stood by Taylor during the town hall meeting. "Dr. Morgan, we wanted to share something with you," Maria said, holding up a folder. Taylor gestured for them to sit. Curious. "What is it?" Eleanor smiled warmly. "It's a letter. A group of us wrote it to the hospital board, expressing our support for you and the changes you've implemented. We wanted them to know how much you mean to this team." Taylor opened the folder and read the letter. It was heartfelt, filled with personal anecdotes from staff members who had worked closely with her. They spoke of her empathy, her willingness to listen, and her unwavering dedication to patient care. Taylor blinked back tears as she looked up at Maria and Eleanor. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This means more to me than I can say." Maria beamed. "You've been here for us through everything. It's time we let you know how much that's mattered." In the weeks that followed, the hospital flourished. The new initiatives Taylor introduced were embraced wholeheartedly, and the staff began to feel more united than ever. Patient satisfaction scores improved, and the hospital's reputation rebounded quickly. Taylor often reflected on the lessons she had learned during the ordeal. She thought about the power of resilience, the importance of humility, and the value of standing firm in the face of adversity. She also thought about the people who had supported her: Maria, Eleanor, Harris, and countless others who had reminded her why she had chosen this path in the first place. One evening, as Taylor walked through the hospital's garden, she paused to watch the sun setting behind the building. The golden light cast a warm glow over the grounds, and for the first time in months, she felt a deep sense of peace. Maria appeared beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said with a grin. Taylor laughed softly, taking one of the cups. "You've got great timing, as always." Maria hesitated, then said, "You know, a lot of us were scared when everything was happening with Dr. Collins. But you never wavered. You showed us what it means to lead not just from the top, but from the heart." Taylor looked at Maria, her smile warm. "Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, about listening and learning, even when it's hard." "I didn't do this alone, Maria. It was all of us, together." Maria nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Still, you've inspired us. And that's something we won't forget." Taylor sipped her coffee, letting the warmth spread through her. She knew there would always be challenges ahead, difficult decisions, unexpected obstacles, and moments of doubt. But she also knew she wasn't alone. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Taylor made her way back inside the hospital. Her steps were steady, her heart full. Riverside General was not just a workplace, it was a community. And together, they had proved that even the strongest storms could be weathered with love, empathy, and a shared commitment to doing what was right. As the sun set over Riverside General Hospital, Dr. Taylor Morgan walked through its bustling halls, her heart filled with gratitude. The challenges she had faced had tested her leadership and resilience, but they had also brought out the strength of the team she cherished so deeply. Together, they had turned adversity into growth, emerging stronger and more united than ever. Taylor knew there would always be new challenges, but the lessons learned about trust, empathy, and standing firm in the face of injustice would guide her and her team forward. Riverside General was not just a hospital, it was a family built on shared purpose and unwavering commitment to care. If you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring tales of resilience and leadership, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more incredible journeys. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.